we're going to go through the motions, and it's going to be fun and educational. And if we're going to get to Q&A here in a little bit. Before we get to that, I just want to talk about a few things kind of get started here. And I do want to recognize Jeff Blubaugh, County Commissioner for District 2. Our districts come together basically on the river over here, and he goes all the way out to, I think, Goddard. Is that right?
119th, but over to Clearwater.
Over to Clearwater, okay. So I don't really know the other line over there. I just know the river is a good dividing line between you and me. And so.
Not in his district.
Yeah. All right. Well, good.
I don't rub anything in, but you know.
So, anyway, I just wanted to number one, welcome you here. This is a first of 3 this year. I'll be doing hopefully 3 of these next year. I hope that these become popular. I was hoping the media might show up, and we might encourage you to talk to your neighbors and friends and other people who are interested in civics to engage this opportunity. And I promise you there's going to be a lot to talk about. I do want to talk a little bit kind of about the county as a whole just to get started, but I just want to say thank you for being here. My name again is Jim Howell. We are recording this. It's going to be posted to YouTube later on, so if you want to go back and hear some information again or share it with somebody, please do that. You don't feel like you have to record it yourself because we are recording it and this will be posted to YouTube. About myself, I live in Derby. I've been married to my wife Leah for almost 34 years. I go to church here. I've raised my 5 kids in Derby. I actually attended Derby schools. I just wanted to say I've got a long history with Southeast Sedgwick County. I actually graduated from Southeast High School. I joined the military and spent 5 years Air Force, spent most of my time in England. I got deployed to a number of things like Saudi Arabia for Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I worked in aviation aircraft. I did flight testing for 24 years. And then I got involved in the state legislature for 2 terms, did a number of things up there. Then I got it focused on the county commission for a number of reasons. I don't know if I'll get to that or not tonight, but I will just share there is a number of things going on up in Topeka that has my interest, and I want to continue lobbying and working on advancing and encouraging certain legislation that I think has an impact on Sedgwick County. I just want to talk a little bit about the county as a whole to get started here. And before we go too far, I'm going to talk about the agenda here. The agenda, of course, we're going to talk about the overview of county government. I say that only because a lot of folks don't know what we do in Sedgwick County. I want to kind of share what Sedgwick County government actually does. A lot of people don't know, so I wanted to spend a couple of minutes on that. And then we're going to do, I don't want to talk about real estate stuff because the county appraiser did his report this morning. It's going to be all over the news. I saw the Eagle article came out almost an hour later with, I think, the most alarming part of that report was like in the first couple of paragraphs, and that was, we'll get to this in a minute, but they said 87% of residential property owners are going to see an increase this year in their valuation, and that increase is an average of 9%. So we'll get to that in a few minutes. I know that's going to be a popular discussion, so there's a lot to that. It's not as easy as it sounds. We actually, we're going to do Q&A, so I'll hopefully do some engagement with you about county government over the next 30 minutes, and then we're going to go to Q&A. If you have a question or a comment, if you can hold it till then, great. If it's burning, you don't want to wait till that long, I suppose we can take it earlier, but my intent is in about 30 minutes, maybe a little bit shorter, we will get to Q&A. So if you have a question, you can certainly write it on the card that's on the table, and I'll be glad to read that question for you. Or if you want to speak in the microphone, we are again recording this, and so I ask you to speak in the microphone, and you can ask your question directly, or make a comment for that matter. So, as you know, this is our org chart. I apologize that this projector is a little bit out of focus, but you notice that the Board of County Commissioners is top row right in the middle. It's like we're the part of the organization that actually has a tremendous amount of responsibility. But I'd like to point out one thing, and that is the citizens of my district, citizens of Sedgwick County, are the boss. Everything we do is for you, the people. We are not rulers, we are servants, and there's a huge difference. We're here to understand what the problems are of Sedgwick County, and we're doing our very best to be very judicious with your tax dollars, provide the services that you desire, and do that in an efficient and effective manner. So you notice also we have some offices that are also elected. We are not over them. Notice they're to the sides. We have the District Attorney Mark Bennett, Sheriff Jeff Easter, County Clerk Kelly Arnold, Register of Deeds Tanya Buckingham, and County Treasurer Brandy Bailey. We also have the 18th Judicial District Court. They are basically an arm of the Kansas Supreme Court. They are elected officials. I think we have 32 elected county judges, plus we have, I think, one magistrate now in Sedgwick County. We also have the election commissioner, which is appointed by the Secretary of State. We also have some appointments that are considered the highest level folks of the county that they do fall under the county commission. That's County Manager Tom Stoltz. He hired a deputy county manager and 2 assistants. We have the county engineer, this is required by law. His name is Lynn Packer. He runs our public works department. We also have county counselor Justin Wagner. We have a contract with him. We have county appraiser Mark Clark. It's interesting about that one. He has a 4-year contract, but he technically doesn't work for us. We fund his office, we fund their salaries, but they don't report to the county commissioners. They actually report to the Property Valuation Division under the Kansas Department of Revenue. So we don't have authority to, if you will, direct, if you will, the county appraiser on how to do his job. That would be, in my opinion, that would be unethical for us to get involved in trying to pressure the county appraiser to change how he behaves. He actually has an authority under the state. Then below that, you see a number of departments there. We have chief financial officer. We have a whole bunch of things under that list, things like finance, budget, purchasing, all kinds of things like that. We have interest bank arena. Then we also have the CIO, the chief information officer, Mike Elpers. He takes care of all of our computing and technology needs. We have under the 3 managers, we have public services, public services, administrative services, and public safety. And those 3 folks they have a number of departments each that they have to manage as directors of those, managers of those areas, and each one of those areas has its own director as well. So we can sit there and debate a little bit about how many departments we have, but generally I would say 46 departments that fall under the umbrella of county government. And so there's a lot going on. So with that. Okay, so we have, I've already kind of mentioned a lot of this already. I like to break, it doesn't show it on this slide the way I usually say it, but I would say this, that we have 4 pillars of county government. We have public works, public safety, public human services, and then we have general government. So actually a 5th one, quality of life. So there's actually 5. We have 5 areas where almost everything we do falls into one of those 5 areas. And so there's a lot of things that are county provided that I think we don't necessarily associate it necessarily with what level of government does this, but tornado sirens, 911, the county jail, elections. We already mentioned the appraiser's office. We have a regional forensic science center. There's all kinds of things that are services we don't necessarily think about where the services come from, but they're part of county government. Okay. Anyway, so there's some county services. We just talked about the 911, EMS. I didn't mention on that org chart a minute ago. There's actually another point on there that talks about we're the governing board of the fire district. Fire district is a separate organization. So the 5 county commissioners serve as the governing board for the fire district. So if you live outside a city that has its own fire services, like Wichita, Derby, Mulvane, there's a few others out there, like Colwich, for example. So if you live in places like Bel Air or Goddard or Mays, Valley Center, these are areas that have they have county fire as their fire protection services. And because of that, they have a separate mill levy they pay to. And we actually exist just ideally, primarily to provide services to them. But we have what's called mutual aid contracts. And so we actually go into Derby, we go into Mulvane, they go into the county, and vice versa. So we help serve each other. When you have a fire, no one cares what name's on the side of the truck. We just want to get the fire out, right? So we do work together, but the fire district is a different governing body under the Board of County Commissioners. And we have administrative things. You can't have an organization if you don't have some overhead. Overhead things like purchasing, finance, CFO. We have risk management. There's all kinds of stuff that falls under these administrative functions. And so human resources is a big one. Human resources is quite large because they're constantly trying to find people to fill the empty positions in the county. So we have to have that. We have to have a manager's office because he manages those 46 departments through his leadership. And then we have, it's like fleet taking care of our vehicles is another big part of what we do. We have ancillary functions. I call these quality of life things. There's actually 8 of them if you list them all, but Interest Bank Arena, Exploration Place, Sedgwick County Zoo, just to name a few. Okay. And then we have, so one of the goals, I think we want to, as a stated goal, we want to be as efficient and as conservative and effective as possible. We don't want to waste any dollars. And it's interesting in the news, we talk about all this government waste we're discovering through review of federal offices. I think that we are always reviewing county offices. We're always looking for places to become more efficient. If we have an idea, we're going to go run with that idea. I don't think there's anybody in our county that is aware of something that's fraud, waste, and abuse is not willing to raise their hand and address those things. And so I really think that the county has done a reasonably good job of trying to stay focused on core function and to be as fiscally conservative as possible. We have had a small mill levy reduction for the last couple of years. Budget process, it says, starts February. In fact, this Friday is our budget retreat. That sounds like a lot of fun, but trust me, it's not. We sit down and talk about our financial goals and financial challenges, and we get together for an entire day Friday. I'm sure it's going to be recorded. It'll be available on YouTube and possibly, Facebook. But if you're really interested in knowing the details of what goes on behind the budget of Sedgwick County, this is again, every meeting we have is public, open meeting, and we want people to engage and understand what's going on. So we would encourage people to pay attention to that. There may be parts of that that are interesting to you. I do my best not to bore people to death, but it'll be a long day. But I promise you, it's going to be a very rich discussion on Friday. Every meeting we have is a public open meeting. Doesn't mean you're going to be invited to speak, but you're certainly welcome to attend. It'll be at WSU Tech in the auditorium is where we're having that financial retreat this Friday. And Nicole, do you know what time that starts? 8:30 a.m. It's going to be an all-day event. So
How often?
we do that every year. Okay,
So
it's once a year. This is the county commissioners to engage our senior staff about what are we going to do this next year. What are our goals? What are our challenges? Articulate, what are you not happy about? What do you want to change in Sedgwick County? I always come up with big ideas. Some of my ideas don't go very far, but I do love the opportunity to talk about things I think we should be considering in Sedgwick County. Okay, so financial situation, we are AAA rated. By the way, that has saved, I can't imagine how many millions of dollars that has saved, because we do bond financing for large projects. We do some road and bridge projects every year that are bonded. Our largest projects are bonded, and that AAA rating has literally saved millions and millions and millions of dollars because we get very low interest rates on money that we have to borrow. So that has been a really great thing. And by the way, it says here, 1 of 106 counties in the U.S. has this rating, only 2 counties in Kansas. So that's something to be very proud of. And that, I think, reflects on our conservative fiscal management, especially the work of Lindsay Pilrisso, our CFO, and others. By the way, I should have said this earlier. I want to say thank you, Kevin and Nicole, for your work today to bring this together. That's our communications director and our AV guy, I guess. I'm not sure what you have a title?
Video specialist.
Video specialist. I should know that. Okay. We just got through spending extra money on, basically because of COVID, the federal government's given us about $200 million since 2020. And you think that's a lot of money. Believe it or not, the cost to Sedgwick County was all that and more. This did not actually get us a financial advantage. There's so many costs involved in what COVID has done to Sedgwick County. I'm glad we had that assistance from the federal government, but I don't view this as a windfall. It says now we're way ahead because of that money. That money was used to take care of business, and so we used that money very, very carefully. In fact, just about a month ago, we finally got rid of the last piece of paper that deals with ARPA spending. It's taken us all these years to get that money figured out, how to best spend that money. I'm gonna turn my podium this way just a little bit.
And what was that? Was that the MAC or the 100 beds?
We did not do that. That's the city of Wichita for the 100-bed.
Well, the county did the 100 beds.
We did a little bit last year, but this year we did not provide money to Wichita's winter shelter, and the MAC is falling under Wichita's umbrella. We did not provide funding to that. Wichita used some of their ARPA money for that, yeah.
Then which one did you do? You had ARPA money for what?
Well, all kinds of things. We had lost revenue was one.
But what was the last one that
ARPA was the last thing we touched in terms of how that money was utilized.
well, what was the last project that had a mandate to it or a time sensitive? What was the last one that you tapped out the ARPA money on?
And that's a complicated question. Actually, I should get you an ARPA spending report. It is very detailed and very complicated. I'm not sure I can answer that question off the top of my head.
Fair question, just in the sense that I thought the county was the MAC or the 100-bed. I thought the 100-bed benefited the sheriff's department, which is underneath you guys, the county, and I thought the 100-bed was the last that was time sensitive for the ARPA money.
Yeah, so Wichita got its own ARPA distribution, and they made some decisions, which is a little confusing in the news when you see the word ARPA to know which jurisdiction made those choices. But the MAC has been something that Wichita has worked on, the multi-agency center.
Sure.
That's a Wichita function, and they're the ones that are providing the funding for that. We're not really involved in the financial side of that. And then in terms of the winter shelter, we did a little bit of money a year ago. We did not provide any money this year for that. So again, they're doing a good job, and they didn't even ask us actually. And I'll get to this hopefully in a minute, but if you think about the services that are being provided to the people downtown that have some of the greatest needs, in terms of, we don't want to duplicate services. If you have one organization providing services, that's actually a smaller, simpler way to provide a service is from one government versus two. Sometimes we do things with Wichita, sometimes they do something on our behalf and we do something on their behalf. And I would argue that when you don't do it together, you're not duplicating the same effort. So it's actually simpler. We're spending an awful lot of money, awful lot of effort on substance abuse and mental health, whereas the city's more focused on the homelessness issue. So it's a nice package. Some people have problems with all three of those, and they're receiving services from the city and from the county. But I would say that we spent more of our effort on mental health and substance abuse. They spent more of the money on homelessness. And so there's nothing wrong with that. Just want to understand it is being dealt with by government. It's just not necessarily Sedgwick County government. So that's okay. I would just talk about, we did, that remodeling courthouse, during the very beginning of COVID, the courthouse got clogged up so tight, nothing was moving, and the court cases started piling up. We decided to move out of the courthouse. We're in the Ruffin building now, and that's a temporary location for the county government. And the reality is that the courthouse needs more courtroom spaces. So thankfully, the judicial arm of our state has invested more money. We've had additional judges assigned to Sedgwick County. We've also remodeled, even split spaces in the courthouse to create more courtrooms. And we have some specialty courts now. So the courthouse actually is if they're not completely caught up right now, they're very close. They're catching up pretty quickly. And that's a consequence of basically a lot of investment to provide better spaces and more judges. And so one of our constitutional principles is a speedy trial. I want to get to trial quickly. But anyway, I would anticipate some growth this year. I don't think any commissioner, I would be surprised. We've not talked about this at all. And I want to say thank you for Jeff for being here, but I would be surprised if any commissioner has any interest whatsoever in capturing 9%. And by the way, the average of all of that together, I created a way to calculate a composite of all the housing. Residential does, I think, about 70, it's in the slide deck from this morning, but what I remember is about 70% of property taxes come from residential properties. If you take that part of the revenue, you look at the increase and the decrease and add them all together and look for a composite change this year, it's about a 7.7% increase in property valuations if you take all the properties into consideration. I don't think any commissioner would be wanting to capture 7.7%. I just don't think that's likely. So it's going to be less than that. I don't think it's going to be zero either. So what the right number is, I think that's a matter of debate. We're going to work very hard to come up with a good approach to that. And then I just wanted to say, this is how we break up your dollars. So think about this. General government, that's a lot of money, $167 million for one thing. Some of that is grant funds. When it goes to public safety, that $209 million for public safety, almost all of that is property tax. Very little of that is grant money. So public safety also includes 911 and EMS. and Regional Forensic Science Center, and the jail, and corrections. We have adult and juvenile corrections both. And there's all kinds of services that are provided through those two corrections departments. But anyway, just about almost everything in public safety comes from property taxes. And we have public services. A lot of that comes from grant funds. And some of that is property taxes, but a lot of that comes from grant funds. Public Works has a mixture of property taxes, a small amount, but has a lot more sales taxes. So sales tax revenue, we have a 1% sales tax in Sedgwick County, and that generated $140 million last year. We have by law, we have to share that with every jurisdiction in the state, in the county. So we kept 40 million of that. There's the distribution formula is in statute. We kept 40 million of that, and the other 100 million went to other jurisdictions. I think Wichita kept, 87 million of that 100 million. Every jurisdiction has to use 50% for public works, okay, and the other 50% for general fund. I will argue that since we don't waste money in Sedgwick County, all of that money, all $40 million is being used in a sense for property tax relief. And $40 million in Sedgwick County, by my calculations, is just a little bit, about 5.5 mils of property tax offset. So 5.5 mils of property tax is not being levied because of the sales tax in Sedgwick County. Now, that's my assumption is if it wasn't for the sales tax, we'd be funding the very same things through property tax. That's how I can say that. So, anyway, that's interesting. Budget by function, you can see again, most of the money goes to public safety. That's that largest 38% there, okay? Okay. Revenue-wise, here you go. We have, again, a $550 million budget. $203 million on this chart comes from property tax. I think property tax is the most despised tax, so we talk a lot about property taxes. All dollars are important. We don't want to waste any dollars no matter where they came from. Property taxes, in my opinion, are special. I call them precious, okay? Okay. So there's your question, Faith. We have some capital projects. One of those, you see the county admin building. We've been working on an answer to that since we moved out of the courthouse. Actually, even before that, we were working on a solution before we moved out of the courthouse. I can tell you we've looked at a lot of different options. There's an option to build a brand new facility. There's also options of buying facilities, and we've looked at places on the east side and west side and south side. We've looked at different options downtown to build. We've had a number of buildings we've looked at trying to remodel. I can tell you I feel like we're getting potentially close to a solution, which I can't legally talk about right now, but I can tell you that I'm a little bit excited that I feel like we're maybe going to cross into a solution here pretty soon. And I would tell you that I hope that we will see us move out of the Ruffin building within about a year and a half from now. That's my hope. I could be right, I could be wrong though.
Facility for what? I didn't.
So the county footprint, if you will, we have, so our communications, our management office, our legal office, the row offices, that's deeds, clerk, and treasurer. We have human resources. All that comes together in the Ruffin building. We are actually taking up the first floor and the sixth floor.
So you're talking. So I thought you were talking about each one of those, and I didn't know if it was.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I jumped to the bottom of that list. I apologize. Yeah. So I will talk about the other ones real quickly. Juvenile campus, we have a $22 million commitment to rebuild our juvenile campus. That will replace a number of buildings over there by the juvenile court. We have a JIAC. JIAC will not be changed, but we have other buildings there that are, and neither will JDF. JDF is going to stay the way it is, but the juvenile residential and juvenile corrections have different spaces there, especially juvenile residential. We've worked very closely with the state of Kansas. They're, as you know, putting a mental health hospital in southwest Sedgwick County. Jeff, I'm right about MacArthur and West Street? MacArthur and Meridian. MacArthur Meridian, okay. There we go. Anyway, it's the state is funding that, but the county is essentially has the responsibility to create that facility, and we're doing all the work to make sure that it's constructed on schedule and it meets all the needs of the state. But they are going to own and operate that building. We're just in the process of creating the infrastructure as a logistical need there. The election office, they did select an office. I didn't vote for this, but over 37th Street North, between Rock Road and Webb Road, in the Comatere area, there is a new building. It's usually, the old Walton's building is now going to become the new election office. We're on hold. We're not been able to make any remodeling. Yet we don't have the building in our possession yet, but that is coming. So the county has committed to that. And then ComCare Crisis Center. If you know where the bioscience facility is downtown, a lot of construction, lots of cranes, and there's roads that are half closed and things like that. That bioscience campus is going to be huge. Thousands of students and doctors and teachers and professors coming together to provide a pipeline of people who are going to get medically trained, including psychiatry type training through that facility. Right across the parking lot from that building is our new ComCare facility. This has been planned for quite a while. We didn't know where to go. We've looked at lots of buildings around the area once again, but since the bioscience is going right there, to have it right next door, we can, if you will, leverage a partnership with bioscience and have those students and other folks, if you will, provide some services with the county, right basically in the same spot. So there's some synergy that comes together by having those things co-located in the same space, if you will.
And you're still talking about the CCC.
The ComCare Crisis Center, right?
Right.
Okay, so I went by that, on that list, I went down backwards. I don't know why I did that, but
I started that, the CCC. I helped start that with Jason Sheck and Marilyn Cook, the director of ComCare, whatever. And so we always called it CCC. But I tell you what, I've always been interested and curious to see just how much the county would support that. And
so let me talk a little bit about, and I got just about I'm going to go for like 5 more minutes. I'm going to try to end this and go to some Q&A here. But I showed this slide. I testified on HCR 5011 up in Topeka last Thursday. This is a slide, one of the slides I showed. This is based on 4,182 homes that were sold in 12 months between October and September 2024. October 23 to September 24, so a 12-month period. Of these, 85.7% of these homes sold at or above the county appraised value. That's 7 out of 8 homes. 7 out of 8 homes sold above the county's appraised value. There are some outliers there. Those red dots show you how many errors we have. I mean, if it was a perfect appraisal, it would be on that green dashed line. That blue solid line shows you the middle of those red dots. So the fact that the middle of the red dots is above the green line actually is good in this case because these are sales prices. That means the appraised value is on the bottom scale and the sales price is on the vertical scale. That means that dot over on the left-hand side, that means that for that particular, there's one example, I circled the dot there. That particular dot appraised at $363,400, but it sold $500,000. So if that was your house, how would you like it if your house was appraised at $343,000 but sold for $500,000 or something like that? And that homeowner's probably pretty happy for a couple of reasons. They've not been paying their fair share. I hate to use the word fair share, that sounds like an offensive way to say this. But when you look at taxes, the taxes should be fair. Taxes are designed to be fair. And if someone's not paying their fair share, I mean, someone else is essentially paying taxes on their behalf. Look at the guy on the other side of that line. This guy over on the right-hand side, his house was appraised for $496,000. He sold his house for $400,000. If I was that guy, I'd be pretty upset. You know why? He's been overpaying his taxes. So at the end of the day, what we want to do here, I think, is reduce these errors, be as close to that green line as possible. If you're going to err on one side or the other, you want to be on the left side of that green line. The left side of that green line is in your favor ever so slightly, but you certainly want to be below that green line. That would be a mistake. But out of this, we have 3,660 of these homes are above the green line. That means that they are selling for above their appraised value. The ones below that, there's another 522 homes below that green line that sold for less than their appraised value. So this chart spoke volumes to the legislature because they're under the impression the appraiser is in error, and I mean, I'll make this a little bit more ugly. They say he's in error almost on purpose. They think he's trying to do things to manipulate more tax dollars. And if you ask the appraiser, like, no, that's not true at all. They're trying to be as accurate as possible. So 5011, what it does is it averages together a number of years of appraisal changes. I have a slide in just a minute. I'll show you the effect of that. But if all you do is you take take that as a moving average, you are essentially giving someone a reduction in their value. Then, by the way, there's two numbers now. They have the average number and the real number. The appraiser has to keep track of two numbers then. And then the average number is where you drive your tax burden, if you will, from that number. And so what that does, it may be a benefit for those folks that have increasing valuations. It's a benefit to them. But that means somebody else who doesn't experience those increasing valuations is paying their fair share, or maybe even more than their fair share. What you're essentially doing is you're shifting that tax burden between property taxpayers. And in the truest sense, and we'll go to the next slide here. This is this year's, do this right here. I did it one too many times again. Okay. This is 2024 on the bottom scale and 2025 on the other scale. That's 172,000 homes. This data just came out yesterday. And so I just created this chart to show you that, again, the wide error, you see that wide error band. Most of them are pretty close to that green line, but there's a lot of them way above it, and there's a lot of them way below it. So again, my example, that one below the line, they are appraised. Last year, they were appraised at $502,000. This year, they're appraised at $287,000. So they had like a $230,000 reduction in their valuation. I don't know why. That's a story. I'm sure there's a story as to what happened there. Maybe they were overvalued before, but they made a correction. We don't know. But the guy on the other side of that line, look what happened to him. He was appraised at $417,200. Now he's appraised at $794,100. He had an increase of about, I don't know, 90% increase. That poor guy, he's going to be pretty upset. I know we're going to get a phone call from that guy and an email. He's upset. The question is, holistically, that's an outlier. Do you agree with me on that? I don't know if that makes sense to you. That's an outlier. That's not where most of the data is. Most of the data is closer to that green line. But there are some examples up there where the people are going to say, "Oh, mine was way off. It was drastic increase." Those people that have 20%, 30%, 50% increases, they get pretty loud, and I understand that. I would be loud too. My answer is, the problem is not the overall picture here. The problem, I think, is actually the amount of the errors on either side of that green line. The width of that red pattern is my concern. We need to do a better job of honing in on the right answer. Accuracy is a goal. The state says in the Kansas Constitution, in Article 11, that there's a requirement to be uniform and equal. So he's targeting 95% of fair market value. If he was exactly perfect and 95% of fair market value, then no one would pay more or less than their fair share. But because he doesn't do that perfectly, some people are paying less than they should pay, and some people are paying more than they should pay. And so we hear from those who are paying more than they should pay, and rightfully so. So back to the sales data. This is new sales data. This is, again, this is a calendar year. Same chart you saw a minute ago, but this is a calendar year. So on a calendar year, we had, I believe, there are 4,645 homes sold in 2024. Notice the black line, that's your one-to-one line. The blue line is your average of the red dots. And again, notice these two dots, because these dots are important. I picked out two home sales. One on the right is appraised at $650,400, and it sold at $495,000. He's probably pretty upset, and I understand why. The other guy on the other side, his house is appraised at $222,500. He sold at $615,000. So that's way off.
And demographics had nothing to do with it. I noticed that, and there's no way, and it'd be probably too complicated, but in that chart, you're not showing demographics.
That's true. I'm just showing the 2024 appraised value versus the sales price. Now that the house is sold, when you sell a house, the appraiser gets a copy of that sales record, and he uses that to make changes to each property's home value. That's the same data, and I showed you a minute ago, but this is now 2025 appraised value. Notice how close that is to there are still some outliers there, not very many though. And the difference is the same two houses I showed you a minute ago, the house on the right, the same house with a 2025 value. Again, remember this right here. Sold for $495,000. It was $650,000. Now it's $519,000. They have a reduction in property value from $650,000 to $519,000. It's still overvalued though. because it sold at $495. The one on the other side, remember it was $222,000 before, now it's $506,000. He sold it at $615. So it went up from $222 to $506. That guy, let me tell you what he's going to say. My value went from $222,000 to $506. I'm really unhappy. My property value went up, 250%. That's crazy. What did you notice though? He's still below sales price. So that guy doesn't have a leg to stand on because he's going to be mad because of the number percentage increase, but it's still way below his sales price. You see what I'm saying? So it's important to look at this data to understand what's really going on. When you look at this data here, I would argue, by the way, the appraiser does what's called a sales ratio study. PVD, Property Valuation Division, does it for the appraiser. And every year we're coming in below the threshold he's allowed to be at. This last year, for the first time since I've been a county commissioner, he's actually in compliance. He's actually above that 90% number. He's supposed to be 90 to 110%. He's at 91%. He's actually in compliance for the first time since I've been a county commissioner. And they don't look at they don't look at every sale like I am. They look at just a select number of sales when they do their analysis. I like my analysis better for that reason. So this is HCR 5011. I don't want to spend too much time on this chart, but the red line shows the composite changes to residential properties since 2015, how much they've gone up. And this year, again, I mentioned a minute ago that 87% went up. 87% of the houses had an average of 9% increase. That's why that red line jumps up there at the end. I told you, take that entire composite score, it's a 7.7% increase in that last little leg there. If you did a 6-year averaging, the green line shows the 6% averaging. So what you're seeing there is a deferral in realizing the actual taxing jurisdictions, if you will, year over year appreciation for residential housing. And the problem with that is, again, for example, if they're making a correction, I talked to a lady the other day, last week, she said hers went up 22%, and I checked it out. I believe what she actually was dealing with was a correction in her value. It wasn't an error, it was a correction. And so having said that, if you wanted to defer averaging that 22% in for 6 years, it'll be 6 more years where she's going to underpay her fair share. So what I'm really after right now, I think what we need to hone in on is dynamically updated and accurate appraisal process. Accuracy is one of our goals. And the only way to do that is to improve our processes, improve our modeling, improve our computers, improve our staff training, improve our verification of what's happening with appraisals. But at the end of the day, the width of that red band is what my concern is. And I think both the legislature, both House and Senate, have a solution by either capping appraisals or by averaging appraisals together over a number of years. And both those have the flaw in that they shift tax burden to commercial and agricultural and then other housing that doesn't have those increases. So I'm concerned about that. And I think that what I'm going to get to right now, I believe a tax lid is something we need to encourage the legislature to look at. A tax lid. Tax lid says that we're going to calculate a growth that is reasonable. And if the reasonable growth isn't enough to satisfy the needs of your jurisdiction, then you want to exceed that, then you got to go to a vote of the people. And the people have a responsibility to vote for exceeding that calculated cap or not. If they say no, then you've got to find a way to live within that calculated cap. If the people say yes, then you can do what you said you're going to do. But a tax lid that's voted on by the people, in my opinion, is the only way to get a handle on the cost, size and scope of government. I've said a lot there. I do want to spend as much time. I do want to hand, Nicole, would you hand these out as well, or someone? Nicole, hand these out. I want you to look at these. This is updated today for some county statistics that you might want to look at. And with that, before I even speak to that at all, we're going to do some questions, some Q&A. If there's no Q&A that happens to keep me busy, I might go back to that chart there in a minute. You might have a question from that chart. So with that, I'd like to open up to questions. And I'm going to go and bring the microphone to you because I want to make sure we record your question on the YouTube and for the record, okay? Okay, she has a microphone. So whoever has a question, go ahead and ask your question or make your comment, and I'll be glad to engage you there. Thank you. right. Faith Martin.
Hi, I'm glad you're talking about this because this is what I wanted to kind of see where your head was at. So I'm on the homeless task force. I'm part of the housing subcommittee, subcommittee of housing. And basically, we're talking a lot about inclusionary housing. And the article I read today in the Eagle talked about, the appraiser said, this is directly related to the housing shortage that we're having. Price, it's supply and demand. That shouldn't be any surprise. When people want houses, the price of houses go up. So the most common way to deal with this that other communities have been doing is inclusionary housing requirements. And I'm not saying Sedgwick County does this. I'm asking that because I looked, you guys, Sedgwick County and City of Wichita have shared economic development guidelines. And if all of the county is being impacted by appraiser values going up because of our housing shortage, and we know we have a shortage of not just housing that's affordable, but affordable housing, we should talk about doing some sort of feasibility study to find out if inclusionary housing zoning is right for us. Basically, economic
Let me interrupt you for just a minute. Can you please explain your term inclusionary housing for all of us, please?
Sure. Inclusionary housing could be set-asides, design standards, income targeting, exemption processes, different ways that we look at increasing the amount of affordable housing. So the way I have been doing research and what we're actually presenting next week to the homeless task force is when considering whether or not to adopt inclusionary housing, you have to do a feasibility study through your economic development department. So city and county should work together, find out if this is something that will benefit us, and find out if there's any appetite for that, because we use taxpayer dollars to give incentives to developers. And the point isn't to expect developers to just build low-income housing for free. They have to make a profit. But we also want our tax dollars used wisely. So I think that there should be a set-aside of 5–10%, whatever the county comes up with when they do their feasibility study of low-income housing, whether it's apartments or single-family homes or duplexes, whatever that looks like, and not give out tax dollars, property tax funded, tax abatements and other financial incentives if developers aren't going to include low-income housing based on HUD standards, and we need to increase those. So I think it's important that Sedgwick County partner with Wichita to have an inclusive housing ordinance.
All right. Thank you. I'll mention we have what's called a RHID. I think the R used to be rural, but now it's called Reinvestment Housing Incentive D. I'm not sure what the D for it. RHID, but RHID is a program that state approved about a year or two ago, and rather than just building housing that would otherwise be built without an incentive, there is some desire to do what's called infill, to have some of the areas that have been dilapidated to kind of rebuilt and if you will, reinvestment in those areas to get them to be more desirable housing areas. So that is, I think, part of the answer that might be from a state level that the county has to essentially that becomes as a tax abatement for certain type of housing that meets those criteria. And it's limited in time, but there's a way to get some incentive to some developers to do that. Believe it or not, Faith, I actually have about 4 or 5 ideas on how to address affordable housing that are kind of outside the box. And I've been talking to a number of people about regulations and the cost of specials. And there'll be some zoning that's dedicated, if you will, for certain market value of homes. Maybe ought to be areas of the county that are dedicated towards housing that's not $250,000 or above. It maybe is $150,000 in that range. So anyway, there are some ideas that are floating out there. I think it is certainly a big discussion. One thing I want to caution us over, and that is, I used the word precious property taxes earlier for a reason. The only discretionary money we have in the county that we can, if you will, decide where to spend that money is property taxes and sales taxes, 50% of the sales taxes. And so we have about $220 million that, I can get rid of this phone call. About $220 million where we make decisions on where to spend that money. And if we were to use those dollars to incentivize other homeowners, then essentially I'm taxing one person out of their home to give the money to this person over here who I think needs it more. And there's a moral issue there, a challenge of taking someone's money that, again, they're assuming that money's for something that's really, really important, a core function of government, and then giving it away to somebody else who I think needs it more, essentially make their home entry less expensive for someone else. So there's a challenge with that. We're going to be very careful.
Remember, it's to make more housing so that our appraisals go down, because we
Yeah.
have high appraisals because we don't have enough housing. So it's to make more housing so that our property values aren't so high.
Yeah, I certainly understand that. Yep, okay. Nicole, Olivia's got a question.
One, I just wanted to say housing is core, 100%, but also your ideas about how to address this, if you haven't, because I'm also on the homeless task force as well, we'd love to hear those. I think we only have a few more months that we're actually meeting, so if you haven't reached out to someone that can get you in there, I mean, these are people that have been working on this for like a year, so we'd love to hear your ideas, and if they overlap with some of the ideas we've been discussing, I mean, we're off to the races at that point, so just want to encourage you to reach out.
I'd like to have a conversation with both of you on this because, again, right now I'm starting with our building codes director, trying to find out if there's a way we can minimize what's being required in terms of our building codes. Because every code eventually has a cost. Regulations are well-intentioned, but regulations cost money. And so we want to try to find a way to, if you will, design housing that doesn't have anything extra. It just provided, and I look at some neighborhoods that were built a very long time ago. For example, in my district, we have Hilltop and Plainview and Oaklawn and Sunview. And in those areas, there are neighborhoods that were very low, they were very low cost to build those neighborhoods. They had alleyways, they had straight streets, they were small 1 and 2 bedroom, even 3 bedroom homes, usually 1 bathroom crawl space homes. I don't think crawl spaces are for the 21st century, but I do think you can do slab on grade and have a Frady hole within that home. I mean, a tornado shelter, a main level tornado shelter built into the house. But you start trying to build houses that are 900 square feet, if you will, more simple, a couple of small bedrooms, one or 2 bedrooms, one of smaller bedrooms, and if you will, open concept. I think the costs come way down. So I think there are some, and I would not build garages, for example. There's a place for a garage out behind the building, but not on the street, not on the front of the house. And so minimize lot sizes, put the garages behind. Some of those ideas, I think, drive the cost way down. So I think there's some good ideas out there, but there is a resistance to change. As you mentioned a minute ago, developers are free to build whatever they want to build, wherever they think they can sell. I'd like to incentivize them to build something maybe it's not in their normal desire that they would build this naturally, but if you will, help them want to build housing that's more affordable. Many people need to enter the home market by getting a house that's $150,000. So, yeah. All right, I love that part. Okay. Who else has a question? Howard, please.
Yeah, 2 questions, but the first one will be real quick and easy. You've always touted about efficiency, and you've even charted it, and yeah. But when you mention accuracy and efficiency, are they one and the same, or what's the difference between the two?
So the comment about accuracy refers to the appraiser being more accurate with his appraisal process, so that there's not as much variation between those people who are overly valued or underly valued. I want to hone in on get those errors back under control. So you think about a manufacturer. A manufacturer will take one item off the production line and they'll measure it and they'll say, is it within tolerances? If not, they'll dial in corrections in that process to build that part to meet their specifications. Essentially what we have right now, we have a process that's producing something that's outside of our bounds. We don't like where it sits. It's overvalued or it's undervalued to the point where something's really wrong with that appraisal. Now, if it's overvalued, we encourage people to get an appeal, okay? But what this data shows here is that there's an awful lot of homes that are overvalued, and there's an awful lot of homes that are undervalued. And the ones that are undervalued, we don't tend to hear from them too much, right? But we know there's a problem, and so my question is, we need to invest in solutions to get that error band to be much more narrow. I don't think there's any way to make it zero errors. I think there's always going to be some errors, but the magnitude of those errors needs to be much less than they are currently. They're way off that line for some reason. And so we need to, I think, investigate as to what's causing these to be so far off. We need to do self-impose corrections to make the accuracy much better. I think it's going to cost us some money to do that. The issue of efficiency or effectiveness, those words are interchangeable sometimes, but we want to, when we talk about services from Sedgwick County, we want to deliver the services that the people desire, and we want to provide those services to the least cost to the taxpayer. And so one of the topics we talk about a lot recently is functional consolidation, or if you will, there's terms that are related to that, where you simplify government. You don't fund things that people don't, you discover something we're funding that people really don't want us to fund those things. And by the way, it's really easy to confuse Sedgwick County government with other levels of government. So when you see a city doing something you think is wasteful, or the federal government doing something that's wasteful, let me give you one example. You drive down the street, or maybe even on the radio, you hear an ad on the radio, something from the Ad Foundation, okay? They have some kind of a deal about, some great topic, fatherlessness or suicide, or some great topic, okay? Those things are good messages, but that's tax dollars at work. And you might say, you know what? I already know about this topic somewhat. I wish they wouldn't spend my tax dollars that way. Well, that's the federal government. There's a billboard that says, wear a mask and get a shot, okay? That bothers a lot of people, but that's the federal government doing that. It's not county government. They just say, well, that's wasteful. And then maybe it is, but the point is, it's not Sedgwick County government. And so one of the things you have to understand when you look at government spending is, make sure your attention is focused on the proper level of government, so that you're not mad about something that you think the county's doing something wrong, but really it's not even the county at all. It's some other level of government, state government or a township or whatever. So you want to understand which government made the decision to spend money that way. If you think it's wasteful, I would encourage you, please, to reach out and tell those people, I think this is wasteful spending. We shouldn't spend that money that way. One of my challenges to everybody in this room, and it's always going to be there, is I would love it if you guys would review how we spend your money and tell us what we're doing that you don't agree with. There's probably going to be a few things on that list, but you got to look at the budget to figure out what that is. I assure you there's things we can trim up. Let me give you one reference point though. Last year, to stay under the revenue neutral rate, last year, the county would have had to cut $17 million out of our budget. And if you followed our budget process, I know a couple of you did, I had a lot of amendments to the budget. Most of them were cuts to services, cuts to things we're doing. And most of those, I didn't even offer all of them. I had 14 amendments prepared. I think of those 14, one or two of those passed. Most of them didn't even get a second, and there was almost no debate. So at the end of the day, I may have trimmed up a little bit, maybe $1 million out of our budget for all that work I put in there. And I'm grateful for that, but to cut $17 million out of our budget seems impossible. We have to pass the budget every year. We have to be fiscally solvent every year. And we have to be very smart with your money. And so at the end of the day, if we can find places to trim up our spending, we certainly want to do that. When I first went into the legislature, a little story here, one of my goals was to cut the sales tax, the temporary sales tax that the state of Kansas was dependent upon. I ran on that idea. I think this is wasteful spending. We're just collecting money. We're wasting money. And I ran on the idea we were going to try to repeal the temporary sales tax. The freshmen that year, there were over 55 freshmen that year, and I think everybody had the same message. We're going to cut this out. Well, our leadership said, hey, y'all go ahead. We know that you guys ran on that, so do what you have to do. So he wrote the bill, and we got it on the floor of the House, and was going to cut $800 million out of our state's budget that year, out of the general fund. And it did not pass. So we tried it a second time to cut 50% of that. $400 million, and it also did not pass. Then we did it again, cut 1/4 of it out, or just $200 million. Show that we could do $200 million. It also did not pass. At the end of the day, it requires a majority of the body to pass a cut. And my thought at the time was, we want to starve the beast. And there's a thought about government. If you simply have more money than you need, you're going to find ways to spend that money. But if you starve the beast, you're going to find ways to cut and live within your means. I know everybody we serve has to live within your means. So I'm okay with the theory of cutting government by starving the beast. And that's why I think the tax lid actually puts the pressure on us to actually find a way to cut government reasonably. Now, I think even if we do cut government that way, it doesn't mean we're not growing the budget. We're going to grow it a small amount that's defendable. I mean, when you think about this, Sheriff's vehicles cost more, ambulances cost more, fire trucks cost more, inmate food costs more, energy costs more, asphalt costs more. We have to give our staff a raise or they're not going to come to work. Right, Nicole? She agrees with that. Kevin says, and he's smiling, so yes, we have to pay our staff. There's just a cost to having that organization. Some of the costs are going to go up. It's inevitable. So if you can cut here to pay for those increases over there, that's great. The problem is, where are you going to cut? And I'm going to tell you, in the county, those cuts are very difficult to find. So I would challenge ourselves to find places to trim up our budget. It's a great challenge to all of us to try find ways to trim up our budget. And we can use those savings here to fund those increases there if we need to. But at the end of the day, a tax lid will give us, if you will, the right to increase government to our satisfaction, to make sure we have the money to do everything we think we want to do. Or if not, if the people say no, then we have a mandate from the people saying you've got to go find a way to cut 2 or 3% of your spending, starving the beast. And I promise you, it can be done. It's not going to be very fun to do that, but I think that I trust the people. I want to trust the citizens and the electors of my district in Sedgwick County to understand the problem statement enough. I trust you with the decision on whether we should grow government at a calculated, reasonable rate based on the local economy, or slightly higher than that to fund the things at the current level. And if people say, I don't want to fund things at the higher level, then we have a mandate to go cut and find ways to cut government. And people say, well, why is that road closed? Why is that bridge closed? Well, we didn't have enough money to maintain that bridge this year. We had to close the bridge. Now they understand there's a consequence for cutting government. And I'll tell you, one thing we had a tax lid in place from 2015 through 2019, but out of 650 jurisdictions in our state, not one of them ever went to a public vote in 5 years. Why is that? Because they had a public safety exemption. And the way that works is they would pull funding out of public safety to fund the things we feel like we need to fund. And then with public safety exemption, they would raise taxes, raise tax dollars to backfill the shortage in public safety. And so 650 jurisdictions in our state, not one of them had a tax lid vote of the people in the 5 years that law existed. I'm suggesting a tax lid without that exemption, because that actually, if you close that exemption down, I think that actually forces then us to have a real vote of the people. And it's going to cost us about $130,000 to have a vote of the people. I think it's worth every penny. I think if we want to grow government 5 or 6 or 7% or 9%, whatever the number is going to be, last year it was about 7% growth in our budget.
All right, so you're supposed to make that first question quick. So no, you're fine. So my question, going all the way back to the beginning when you was outlining the departments, whatever, the one department that you hold the purse strings to and that you fund whatever, but it's not elected by what that department is. And so when you say that your main interest is the people and the people's interest, if this one department that you were talking about isn't elected by, even though you're in charge of the money that they get, is that a one-off, and what's the detriment that somebody else is making those? Yeah.
I liken this to the school, the legislature and school funding is a great connection to that. The legislature by Constitution has to fund education. Public education is funded by the Constitution. And when they don't fund it adequately, or what's the other word they use? Adequate and, there's two words, adequacy and equity, I guess. Anyway, if they don't do that correctly, it ends up in front of the judges, and the judges make decisions on what the legislature has to do. The legislature has been sued over and over again on school finance because they make a constitutional argument that you have to fund this education to a reasonable level, says the courts, because it's in the Constitution. Well, let me give you an example here. There's a lot of stuff on that chart there that is funded through county government. There have been county commissions in the state of Kansas who have not funded their sheriff's offices because of a political choice not to. They just say, we're not going to fund you. You make a request, we're not going to fund you. Sorry, the answer is no. And that sheriff then will take it to the courts and they will win. Because constitutionally, we have to have a sheriff and we're going to fund his office. We have to. So thankfully, we have a good sheriff in Sedgwick County. He is conservative, but he does spend a fair amount of money because he has to. There we have a large jail. We have a lot going on under the sheriff's umbrella, which is why it's the largest part of our budget. But at the end of the day, if we decide we want to cut government and we want to cut the sheriff, he has an argument he can make in front of a court that can compel us to levy taxes and fund his court to a judicial satisfaction, if you will. And there's other things on this list here that are kind of like that. Now, the county engineer works for us. He doesn't have the statutory cards in his hand like the county sheriff does, but the district attorney does. District attorney can certainly pull the same card. We have to fund his office, and he does a great job. And I think he's a conservative. He does the best he can. But if we don't fund his office, he can't adjudicate crime in Sedgwick County because we don't fund his office. And he goes in front of a court, and we're going to lose. He'll win that argument. The other ones, the clerk, register of deeds, and treasurer are primarily fee-funded.
It was just that one that I was curious about,
Yeah.
because that was the only one that was the outlier that wasn't.
There's one oddball on this list here, and that's, and she's a great lady. The election commission position is a strange thing. We have 4 counties in the state where the Secretary of State appoints an election commissioner. Every other county, the other 101, the county clerk does elections for those counties, and the county commissioners fund those offices. But again, if we don't fund elections to the Secretary of State's satisfaction, there was a while back where the county election commissioner said, we need about 4 more full-time staff. And I said, I don't think so. I think you can live with 2. Okay? Or maybe how about you get 4 part-timers or 4 contractors? And the answer was, the Secretary of State visited me and said, you know what? We're going to sue you if you don't fund these 4 positions. So I said, okay. We funded them. So the answer is, we don't have a lot of choice on some of these positions. And let me also say, this is very anecdotal, but let's say over 90% of our property tax spending is really non-discretionary. We don't know, I don't know the exact number, but it's around that number. Around 90% of our property tax spending is non-discretionary. We don't have to fix a bridge, we don't have to fix a road, those are choices we make. I think you guys want us to fix your bridges and roads. But there's a lot of things we do, we don't really have a lot of choice. You have to have a county jail, you have to have a county sheriff's office, you have to have elections office, and we have to have tornado sirens. We have to have a 911 and all that goes. And so we've opted to have countywide EMS. That's a choice we made. We don't have to do that. We don't have to have countywide EMS. Thank you, by the way, for your paramedic. She's a paramedic back there. We don't have to do that. We don't actually have to have a fire district, believe it or not. But I think those are smart things to do. People want those things to exist, and I think we do a good job. And I'm very proud of our EMS. But at the end of the day, we don't have to do that. I think that's a choice we make, and I think everybody agrees with that. Some people out there are not happy with our level of EMS. They think, you know what? I wish it was better. I think rather than having 22 ambulances on the streets, you ought to have 25 or 26. I tend to agree with them, by the way. But if they're not happy, if the city of Derby is not happy with our EMS services, there's a possibility they would say, you know what? We're just going to go our own way. We have a county-wide contract, but it has to be renewed every so often. It's very possible that contract could be jeopardized. In fact, Wichita, back in about 2019 I think it was, or 2018, Wichita voted to pull out of the county-wide EMS contract. The problem was there was 2 council members missing that day, and there was 3 in favor and 2 against, and it requires 4 to pass. So the motion failed. But they're not happy with our EMS. And so it's important to us to understand, what do people want us to do? I'm asking the people here and the people in my district to let us know, where do you want us to make services better, and where are we wasting your money? Because if you think if we can do this job better by talking to you and having an understanding exactly what you want us to do, I think we do a lot better understanding your perspective. Faith, you had another question?
If you go back 2 slides,
That one?
yes.
Okay.
If you look under the chief financial officer, the very last bullet point, if you would like recommendations on what you could do to give us at least 1 mil, maybe more, depends. It was about $11 million last year.
Yeah.
We're only contractually obligated to help them with their capital. We have to fund that. The rest of it, if we're talking about stuff to cut, I don't want to give WSU $11 million. If we have to help them with what you're contractually obligated, but I can see that money going to ComCare, I can see that money going to elections, I can see that money going to fire. If we're going to cut things, that's something that needs to be cut. That's a whole mill.
So this last year, we gave them $11.6 million, that's 1.5 mils. It's in statute that Wichita has to give WSU 1.5 mils, and that's how they convert it from Wichita University to Wichita State University. And the regents said, for us to call it under the regents, we're gonna require 1.5 mils of local support. County Commission said, well, it's a bigger base to use the county rather than the city. So the county took on the obligation on behalf of the city of Wichita. So the county's been levying 1.5 mils, unless last year's it's $11.6 million. So what Faith is talking about is we could consider changes to state law. Without even doing that, we could make a vote of the county commissioners and hand this back to Wichita and make them do 1.5 mils. The county's on the hook for about $0.5 mil for capital outlay for WSU. That's true. So we could theoretically cut 1 mil in the county, and if you will, force Wichita to pick up the other 1.5 mils for themselves. 1 mil in Wichita is a little more than $5 million. 1 mil in Sedgwick County right now is 6.7. It's going to go up this year. I'm going to guess probably a little bit more than $7 million for 1 mil in Sedgwick County this next year. Again, that 7.77% increase. So I think it's an interesting topic. I did bring it up this last year. I did have a motion to do that. And I would tell you that Wichita State University was very unhappy with me. It's a great discussion. And by the way, I'm pretty sure I don't have the support of my colleagues to do that.
But they get like $900 million in grant funding. So our little $11 million is not going to hurt them much, but it hurts us when we're paying our property tax.
And so $1 million for us, if we did do that. If you live in Wichita, it's not going to necessarily impact you in Wichita. But if you live in Sedgwick County, you would see a reduction of $1 million, about 1/7 of a mil. All right, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was just going to say, when we looked into this budget item of what we were giving WSU, it was something like scholarship or recruiting or something, and a lot of those funds actually went unallocated to students. So it's like, it's just sitting there. But whether or not that, yeah, anyway. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit, and it's hopefully just a quick answer, but can you fill me in on what I missed with the whole, like, why commission meetings are not on public television anymore? Like, because I'm really concerned. I heard that it's going to be Facebook, YouTube, website, but I know, and you have a neighborhood in your district where we do not have internet access, we don't have smartphones, we do not have data, and so and also getting all the way downtown and getting to the Ruffin, it's a whole thing. So I'm concerned about that piece of it, but I feel like I missed something. So can you fill me in on that?
Yeah, so the contract with KPTS or PBS Kansas was, I think, a little more than $100,000 a year. I think we knocked it down to $100,000. Maybe, is it $100,000 this last year we talked about?
I think you knocked
80,000? So $80,000 is what that costs for us to be broadcast. And so, of course, trying to save taxpayer money, there's an interest in maybe not doing that. But really what really happened here was we have
I'm on the board of trustees, and they weren't happy with it.
I understand that.
Okay.
And again, I have been supportive of KPTS, again, for the issue of transparency. I agree. I would like, and the viewership on KPTS and PBS Kansas is way high compared to Facebook and YouTube. So in terms of being transparent, I realize that the greater the viewership is, the more transparent, more accountable we become. I can prove that because the amount of comments I get back from things we do, I think of myself, where's the outcry from what we just did today? You know, I vote one way and my colleagues vote a different way. I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be a news story. People are going to get mad about this or that. I don't hear anything at all. So it just tells me people are not getting the same messaging they did before. I know people personally that are not getting the meetings because they were watching on KPTS and now they're not doing that. We had talked a little bit about you getting this on Channel 7 under Cox, with Wichita. Now Derby has its own Channel 7. And so even if we did do that, again, if you don't have Cox cable, you're not going to have access to that either. I don't have Cox cable at my house. I have YouTube TV or something. So, again, I watch it on YouTube TV, okay? Actually, I can't even do that because it was on KPTS, and so I could record the show and watch it that way. Now I'm basically have to watch it on YouTube, the YouTube channel, not YouTube TV. So, yeah, so the reason that this happened was their attorneys and our attorneys have not agreed on language to move forward. We're still trying. I messaged Nicole this morning, said, have we solved our impasse yet? And the answer is no. The lawyers are still debating something in the contract. So I think there's conversations ongoing. It's my intent to get back on KPTS. But the longer we stay off of there, I think it's going to get easier and easier not to go back. So I'm following this pretty closely. I hope we do go back. I think it's worth the money.
We had heard it was like temporary and that something changed in the last couple of weeks where it was like fully dead. So just the fact that there's on.
And you might remember that when the manager had his recommended budget last year, it included a cut, 100% cut to that. And Ryan Beatty made a motion to put that back in, $80,000, and I voted for it. Okay? Next question.
But I was not aware, to what you're addressing, I was not aware that this was no longer available, because I'm still getting PBS Kansas.
We're not broadcasting on KPTS, PBS Kansas right now. We're not broadcasting on there.
As of when? When did that happen?
Basically, first of the year, January the 1st.
I didn't see,
Yeah.
so it's so recent that I didn't even realize it. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Anybody else have a question? Come on.
No, always got a question, you know me. Okay, so maybe Jeff can help me out on this. Because of the housing situation and everything, I noticed that like out in my area, in Jeff's area, they're building more condos and whatever. And of course, there's always, with the homeowners associations, there's always a big fight as it brings in, it lowers the cost of value of our homes, whatever. So with that said, are we going to see more condos and duplexes and apartment complexes because of the times that we're in?
Yeah. I think that an awful lot of people who are single-family homes can't really afford a single-family home. I mean, so at the end of the day, apartments and duplexes and quadplexes and other things like that are extremely popular. I think right now we're building more duplexes in Wichita than we ever have. They're going up all over Sedgwick County and even in Derby. So at the end of the day, I think if they save $30,000, $40,000 by having a duplex versus a single-family home, a lot of folks can get into that home at that price point. And the builders seem to be interested in building those. They can build a lot of them really quickly, and that seems to be the temporary solution. Personally, I don't like that answer. I think we ought to go back to even smaller homes that are single-family homes. I think that's a lot of desire to do that, but there's really no one building those in Wichita, Sedgwick County at the moment that's, I think, at that price point that people can afford. The average home, it's in the slides from the appraiser today, but the average home today in Sedgwick County has just gotten so high that, I don't remember the exact number, it's over $250,000, I think, for basically the average priced home in Sedgwick County. So, unfortunately, that seems to be the organic solution is more duplexes. I don't know that that's the best answer, but that's what we're seeing right now.
Well, no one's liking it.
I understand. Other questions? I'm going to wrap this up. I did have a handout earlier. I want to just point out a couple things on the handout. You have another question, Faith?
There was a slide that said 3% of the budget of the pie.
Yep.
I
That
was just
one?
wondering, that one, maybe. Community development, 3%, yeah, it was one more back because it broke down everything that like police had all their stuff under there. But it didn't say what the 3%, there it is, that slide right there. 3% community development, what is that?
Okay, I think that is things like senior centers and we have aging services.
Well, that's under the 17% for public
Aging's actually in a
services.
public services,
Yeah.
excuse me. So 3% community development. Nicole, any idea?
This is Brett Shelton's office.
Oh, so economic development and basically, anything else on that list? Pretty much that's it, economic development.
So when we say economic development, you mean funds that are paid out to to create development? So it could be incentives, could be, I know, because like Wichita, it could be bonds, it could be other financial incentives for development. Is that
Yeah.
what that means? Like,
No, I don't think that's what that means.
so this is literally $13 million for one person's office? I couldn't find anywhere what that meant, community development.
Okay, let me get back with you on that one. I wish I had a better answer.
Well,
You're the first person to ever ask me that, so I love you, Faith, for thinking differently than everybody else. It's okay. I'll get you a good answer.
If there's things to cut, I want to know what everything is,
Yeah.
so I'm making a good decision.
I appreciate that very much. I'll get you a better, much more comprehensive answer to the question. If I had my budget book with me, I'm sure I could answer. I don't have my budget book with me, but I apologize not knowing that off the top of my head. Who else has a question or a comment?
Let me show my ignorance here and ask you an ignorant question. I don't know if that has to be on, I talk about it. Back when you were talking about, the rough and building, in the beginning it was, we had consultants come in and give us 3 options, or I don't know if you guys made that decision and gave the 3 options, the 3 different locations. You took the vote on it, whatever, and so it was the rough and building. So when I hear the word temporary, which this is my ignorance, I didn't know that was temporary. I thought you guys were going to be there for a while. So with that in mind, so are you going to hire consultants, or you did mention that you had 3 areas that you were looking for, so you won't need the consultants, and then will that go to a vote?
So we have again, great staff. Tanya Cole, one of our assistant county managers, is head of our facilities, part of our county organization, and she's got a director of facilities as well, and Andrew does a great job. We have some on-call realtors we use that are helping us do a property search, and again, they find proposals. They work with realtors from the people trying to sell properties, and they'll bring proposals to us. And we have to meet usually in executive session to discuss the details of an idea that we might have. But really, the ideas really are to live where we're at right now under a lease. That's over $1 million a year. Long term, that's not a good solution. And I think I would consider that to be the most expensive solution on the table. One of the other options is to build, and we were going to talk about building over at 3rd and Main, right next to City Hall. There's next to the old Epic Center. There's a piece of property that's available, and we would build a smaller building on that footprint. There was actually, a while back, there was a discussion about raising the DA annex, which is the north part of the courthouse, raise those 2 floors and build, or maybe not even raise those 2 floors, but build on top of those 2 floors. There's been a number of ideas on building, but those building ideas, I think in today's world with construction costs and everything else, we're looking at probably at construction cost somewhere north of 30, probably more like $40 million. When you add in bond and interest and FF&E, which is furniture, basically contingency funds and things like that goes into there, we're talking probably more than $50 million to do that as a solution. So even though that's still less expensive than roughing over time, I don't know if I'm happy with that big number. And so right now we're looking at buildings to purchase. We've seen buildings as low as $6 million and some buildings as high as $20 million where we could purchase a building and remodel it for our county's needs. In either case, whether it's a lesser expensive building or more expensive building, I think it saves taxpayers quite a lot of money over leasing for long-term or building brand new. And there's a million square feet of office space downtown. If you look for it, it's all over the place. We could purchase a couple floors of the Epic Center, for example. We might make a deal with Phil Ruffin and buy part of our building we're in right now. There's ideas out there. But I think the one idea we're kind of gravitating towards right now, actually, let me tell you, there's 2 ideas. One of those is to purchase an existing building in the downtown footprint, and I think that may be one of the best deals for the taxpayer. The other deal, which I think Lily Wu loves this idea, and she keeps talking about it, and a couple of council members talked about it, and that is moving the county commission, or move the county government into the city hall. Now, it sounds good, but before you go there, there's a cost, because there's 3 floors we would need down that building, maybe even more, 3.5 or 4 floors we need on that building. To move them out is going to cost us money to move them out. I've heard estimates as $25 to $30 million to offset what's in those buildings currently. Sounds good, but at the end of the day, it may not be the best deal for the taxpayer. If you're looking for the least cost solution, co-locating in City Hall, again, it's a nice image having county commission on, or county government on one floor, city government on the next floor. It sounds really, really good. It may not be less money. So you have to be very careful about falling in love with an idea too quickly. But that discussion is happening. I'll just tell you that. I don't think that anybody has proposed it seriously yet. I know it's an idea that people talk about when they go to socials and things like that. It might come up in some round conversation somewhere, but there has been no one put pen to paper and say, here's exactly how this would work. I do know the estimate to move people out of that building, to move 3 floors, to be around $25 to $30 million.
Well, you'd have to get rid of the security, the long lines getting into the city, though. That would be a
That is a concern as well. Yeah. All right. Okay. So again, I'm not sure I can tell you more than I've already told you. I think the best answer on the table is probably to find a building we can afford and buy that and remodel it for our needs. And there are a few options downtown, and I think that is reasonably possible.
And then you talk about the long term, but the bottom line is the Ruffin building, which you got a lot going on in there as far as the registries, the clerk's office, on and on. But that's out of the question. So you can say that for the long term, the Ruffin building is not an option.
Well, if 3 commissioners say it is, then I suppose we could potentially say yes, but I don't think that's an answer. I think right now when asked, we've talked about this in public meetings before, but right now there doesn't seem to be a majority of commissioners that think that's the best solution on the table. So I think that right now we're still looking for other options. I don't know exactly, we've not voted on that. We've not ever had a resolution saying, absolutely not, we're not going to do that. We've never voted on that. But, as a conversation has been going on for 10 years, I can tell you that it doesn't seem to me there's a lot of interest in renting a facility for long periods of time. That seems to be the problem. I think at the end of the day, we're trying to find the least cost, a good solution for good office space for the least cost that's convenient. And again, I actually like some buildings that are further from downtown, but they're not as convenient because they're not downtown. People want the county footprint to be downtown. And if you're willing to step away from downtown, I think you could save $10 million pretty easily. But you got to be willing to drive 10 minutes. And right now, these conversations have come up in the past. There's not a lot of willpower to go look at buildings seriously outside the downtown area. So, used to be a long time ago, we had a financing constraint that said he had to be within 3 blocks of the county courthouse to get the best deal on financing. Well, the state legislature changed the law on that, and so that no longer is a requirement. So we could really go anywhere in the county and get the best financing for the project. So that's not a constraint any longer, but I think there's still a desire by a lot of people that says county government should be downtown. We're investing a lot of money downtown. Well, you should be downtown in that heart of the city, if you will. So, all right, Donna's got a question. 6 minutes left. We're going to end this in 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. At one time, you were talking about the culture and recreation maybe being based on sales tax instead of that. Is that going anywhere? Are those entities able to self-support themselves, or is that not even a...
So there's actually 2 things in play here when you talk that. Again, let me just start off by saying that trying to bifurcate these 2 discussions because it's easy to get the 2 confused. We have an existing sales tax, and I told you a minute ago, or a few minutes back, that it generated $40 million for the county. $20 million of that goes to public works for roads and bridges. The other $20 million gets dumped into the same bucket of money as the precious property taxes. So we spend about $14 million on culture and recreation. What's it say there? About $15 million. About $19.6 million is coming from sales tax. So I had a resolution a while back that said, I want to be clear. Now, this is presuming that we go into a recession or a depression in the future, that for some reason sales tax dollars dwindle. I don't ever want to fund those things that are currently being funded, I should say, that $15 million. I want to earmark sales tax dollars to be the source of those dollars for culture and rec. So I had a resolution that said, if there's not sufficient sales tax dollars to fund culture and rec, it would prohibit us using property tax dollars to fund the culture and rec. It was essentially, I call it a check valve. It prohibited using property tax dollars to fund culture and rec. So what that did was, sales tax dollars are the most spendable. And you can use sales tax dollars to build a jail, to fund the sheriff, to buy a sheriff's vehicle, to pay for staff anywhere in the county footprint. Sales tax dollars can be used for anything, including culture and rec. But property tax dollars would be constrained. They would not be allowed to use those for culture and rec. So if there's not sufficient sales tax dollars to fund that, you can't go to property tax dollars. That resolution did not pass. I tried it 2 or 3 times. And right now, we're going to take a look at this again in October, supposedly. We'll see if it passes then. I don't have a lot of faith it's going to pass. But I do think that it's a good principle to live by. It doesn't substantially change what we're doing today. It's just simply saying our $15 million of culture and rec are being funded through the existing sales tax. That's all you're saying. And there's a possibility in the future that we may have to make decisions about whether or not you want to fund that stuff through property tax dollars, because if sales tax dollars dwindles for some reason, then you have some problems to figure out. But there's another argument, though, that says that, I think property tax dollars are the most egregious form of taxation there is. Some people say taxes are taxes. We don't care what, I don't like any of them. They're all the same to me. Some people are like that. Some other people say, you know what, consumption taxes, I don't care about that too much. I really don't like my property taxes. And in the end of the day, there's a principle that says to tax someone's place where they live, their dwelling, seems to be a really bad way to fund government, okay? We actually have a state sales tax exemption on food now. By the way, if you're on SNAP, TANF, or WIC, you're not paying sales tax on food anyway. It's always been that way. But now we don't pay sales tax on food. And the theory behind it was taxing somebody's food. They need food to live. You don't tax things, basic staples of life. You have to have food, clothing, and shelter. You don't want to tax those things to fund government. So the theory was that taxing someone's dwelling is kind of a principal issue. We probably shouldn't do that. In other states, I don't think tax dwelling nearly as much as we do in Kansas. Our property taxes are not similar to other states. We're very high on property taxes, one of the highest in the country. And so the thought is, well, if we're not going to fund government through property taxes, what other choice do we have? We're not going to do income taxes. That's not going to happen. The only other option we have is sales tax. And so the question was, do we want to buy down our rates of property tax by having additional consumption tax, sales tax? Great discussion. So I said, why don't we have a new sales tax that would be explicitly for culture and recreation? It protects them. It gives them a source of funding that's not tied to anything else. And we'll use all of our sales tax money simply to offset property taxes. We would actually see, a new sales tax. Let's give you some numbers here. 0.5% would be 70 million. 1/4% would be 35 million. 1/8% would be just about the right number, $17.5 million. So imagine 1/8% sales tax, not shared with any other jurisdiction, but solely dedicated to culture and recreation in Sedgwick County. And when I did that, I raised $17 million a year. And when I raised $17 million a year, I would actually cut our mill levy an equivalent 2.5 mills property tax, because I'm using sales tax that's currently being levied on the 1% sales tax we already have. Use all that money for property tax relief that was funding culture and rec. So basically, we're going to go from 1% to 1.125%, and the 8% is dedicated, if you will. It's a nice proposal, right? I think we should do that, because at the end of the day, these organizations are vulnerable. If we have to cut government, I hate to say this, but I told you 90% of what we do is not discretionary. The one thing we do that's under the property tax umbrella, which is completely discretionary, is that stuff. The zoo, Exploration Place, Lake Afton, Central County Park, Historical Museum, African American Museum, all that stuff is 100% discretionary. So if it comes down to it, I have to cut the sheriff's office or cut culture and rec, guess what's going to get cut? You want to protect them? Then pass that 1/8% sales tax and protect them forever. And my question is, if people want that, they should vote for it. And I think we would enjoy a tax reduction on the property tax side and protect our culture and rec with a dedicated revenue stream. Here's the problem. People said Jim Howell wants a new tax increase. I'm out. If that's the headline, then I'm not going to be the guy that's going to push this idea forward. I don't want to be associated with a new sales tax to grow government. It's with the intent of reducing property taxes. That's the full package of discussion there. But they separated that. They said Jim Howell wants a tax increase. Then guess what? I just walked away. I'm not going to push the idea of a new sales tax if it doesn't have the net effect of protecting culture and rec and lowering property taxes an equal amount. To me, it's a great discussion, but I can't get that conversation to stay together. It falls apart when people say, Jim Howell wants a tax increase, then I walk away. I can't do that. So, thanks for the question. It's 8 o'clock. So the next time we'll do this, again, is 4 months from now, and we'll put it on Facebook and stuff. I hope you guys will come back. Please invite more people. Again, I think this is a great opportunity to learn a lot about county government, ask lots of great questions, engage me and talk about stuff that's important to you. We're going to pass the budget in August. This is February, so 4 months from now would be, I think, June. In June, we'll have our next Citizens Town Hall. Same place, same time. I'll pick the date, and it's actually already published. And then finally, I want to say this. I think you all get my newsletter already. I hope you do. If you don't get my newsletter, please make sure you sign up for that. And then I didn't talk about the collaboration board tonight. We're out of time. But there's some changes happening in Sedgwick County in District 5, how I'm engaging the citizenry. And I didn't have time to talk about that tonight, but there's more opportunities to talk to me about stuff that's important to you. I'll just say this, my next coffee will be the end of the last Friday of this month at Calvary Baptist Church from 7 to 9 a.m. That's February the 28th. I think that's a Friday morning. So if you want to talk to me some more, that's your next best opportunity. All right? Thank you, everyone, for being here, and that's it.
Thank you, Jim.